obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens.
Hello and welcome to the newest episode of our Parking Industry Podcast. My name is Leigh Thomas and I am here with Clyde Wilson and our special guest, Joaquin Rojas. This is going to be a fun, organic conversation about the parking industry, so stay tuned for some great tidbits. Good morning, Joaquin.
Good morning.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Morning, Clyde.
Morning, everybody. Certainly glad to see you guys.
It's fun to be here. Joaquin, would you introduce yourself? Tell us where you are in the parking industry. And we also really love to hear the story of how you got into the parking industry.
Great. So my name is Joaquin Rojas again. Thank you for the introduction. I'm currently the Director of Parking and Transportation for Bal Harbour Shops, high-end luxury center here in South Florida. I got into the parking industry in 2003. As a college high school student, started as a cashier with standard parking up core at the time. Then that name has changed like several times throughout the years. Started as a cashier, moved on to Valet, and I worked with standard for about 6 years. And then I went over and I started working with the Parking Network. I did the Parking Network for another 3 or 4 years, and then moved to the municipal side, where I started working with the Miami Parking Authority. Did that for 4 years, and then went back to SP Plus or Standard at that time. Now they were changed already to SP Plus. I did SP Plus for another 4 years, and now I'm with the Bal Harbour Shops with my family.
You started as a cashier.
Yes.
How does that memory and that experience shape what you do now?
For me, I always found that being able to start as a cashier or even as a entry level in this industry gives us an advantage because we understand the business from that level, right? I remember, I was a cashier at a hospital. So like at 3:00, it was 2 booths and we were trying to get 1,000 cars to the garage. So we had lines that go up to the 4th level. And it was like from 3:00 to like 7:00, it was just nonstop transaction.
You were at Jackson Memorial, right?
I was at Jackson Memorial. And it was, it was exciting because there was, you get to see like how the equipment works. You get to learn how to troubleshoot it because, if the gate goes down, like there's not closing on the lane and opening and even one lane, you have to fix the lane and figure it out. So that experience was key to my success, I think. And then also when I transitioned to the Valet, because the Valet is such a tough industry or a sector of this industry. And if you don't work the Valet, it's hard to understand it. So now that I oversee a Valet operation, we park 400 cars a day here. I understand and I sympathize a lot with the Valet runners, and I understand what it needs to be successful, and I give them the resources to do that. And I think here at Bal Harbour Shop specifically, we've managed that. We've managed success. We've managed, excellent retrieval times. We're under 4 minutes now. Our level of customer service, it's, I've worked several Valet operations. I've never seen it here. The guys, the way they're trained. And I give all the credit to the manager that's here. He's been here for 20 years. But I think with his knowledge of this specific location and my knowledge of the industry, together we've taken the Valet from where it was, which wasn't a bad, but we've taken it to the next level. So, that's one of the things I take pride in what we've been able to do here at Bal Harbour Shops with the Valet operation. But again, and then going into, doing cashier, doing Valet, then going into the, I think the biggest transition for me was when I moved from Standard to the Parking Network, because now I got to learn parking on another world, right? It wasn't operations anymore. Now I'm looking into like the analytics of parking. I'm looking into the financials of parking, where the ARs, which I think it's very important when you're talking about monthly parking. Make sure that your ARs, are always kept to the minimum. Going out there, counting cars, doing revenue estimations, it opened my eyes to a different world of this industry, which kind of gave me, that knowledge that allowed me to become the consultant that I wanted to always be. I wanted to always start the company and be able to help asset owners or even small parking operators, because a lot of these small parking operators are just small businesses in essence, they kind of don't know what they get themselves into. And and the parking industry specific, there's a valet. I'm just gonna open a valet stand and the cars are gonna pour in, and it doesn't work that way, right? You gotta look at your market. You gotta look what's your competition, and things like that. So I think that having those skills and being able to share that with clients or asset owners, stuff like that, has been very, very important for me. And for me, it's something that really fulfills me from a parking professional, because it's not even about, the money. It's seeing someone, just be successful in their world. And I've worked with small companies where they had 2 locations and now they have 50 locations. So, I like to always think like, maybe it wasn't a lot, but maybe a small percentage of that was something that I was able to do for them.
Absolutely. Like, we're always hoping to just help another human along, right? To help someone else do better. That is the greatest satisfaction. So what do you think causes those companies that start so small as a 2-location company? What is the thing that accelerates the growth to be such a successful business?
I think laying that foundation to be able to grow. When I work with a specific company, for me, it was always like, don't think that you're a small company, think that you're a big company. Hire your human resource person, hire a good bookkeeper, hire a marketing person, like get ready for what you're going to be, not what you are now. A lot of these companies like, no, I'll take care of the HR. No, I'll take care of the marketing. And I'm not a marketing expert. I'm not an HR expert. I've worked with a lot of people in my career, but HR is a very unique role, and it's a very important role to the company. So laying that foundation for growth, it's, I think, key for this small company. And I was able to do that with them. Open up a website, market it, even if it's through a Google ad campaign, get a company to manage that, see what your clicks are, and then obviously training, customer service, make sure you guys are well trained, and take the training process seriously. A lot of companies, they onboard people and they're like, okay, just go train with this person and learn what they do. And I don't think it should be that way. I think there should be a training guide. I think there should be, a checklist. Okay, you learn this, and test them on it. Right? A lot of people say, yeah, you train? Yeah, I know everything. And then you test on them and they don't know anything. So I think that is also key. Training the staff. So when they start growing, they already know how to train the new onboarding. So train the trainer program, basically. So, those are some of the factors that contribute to becoming a small from a small company to becoming a bigger company.
Leigh, one of the interesting things is I'm listening to this, and of course I knew his background pretty well, but of the people that we interviewed for the podcast, how many of them started somewhere as a cashier or a valet and then came up through this industry? There are those unique people that started and worked their way up through this industry, and they end up as some of the top people across the country. It's amazing how that happens. It's just always interesting to me every time I hear that story.
Those are the best stories, speaking to someone, especially if you come from the same, came through the same way. It's just to share the stories, and it's such a good experience. I know a lot of us didn't want to end up in the parking industry, but we're here now. We made the best out of it, right? So it's always good to share the stories.
When I am talking to somebody like you, the conversation tends to be slightly different because we know parking at a totally different level than a lot of people do. And and we're here because we love it now.
Yes,
Very
absolutely.
much.
Well, something I'd like to hear from both of you, because you are the experts in the industry and I am definitely the novice. I came to the parking industry through the education world and I've been here for 2 years, but you both have experience with hospitals. And that has come up for us here at TPN in a special project recently. But I'm curious, how is managing hospital parking different from managing parking in other areas of business?
For me, it's, I think you have to be a little bit, you have to have some empathy, right? 'Cause people that are coming to the hospital, they probably don't want to be there unless they're celebrating a new life, baby born. But for most part, they're either sick or they're visiting someone sick. So it's tough. At the end of the day, it's still business. So you have to run it accordingly. But you have to have some empathy. I remember my days at Jackson Hospital when I was working with the city of Miami and we were running that garage. We changed the program that took away free parking to handicapped parkers, but we kind of substituted that with giving them the first 2 hours of parking for free, because we understood, just doing one bad thing and not replacing it with another good one, it's not going to work out. And we did get some backlash because, no one likes to pay for parking, even even us parking people. The 2 hour did have a positive feedback. We got a lot of positive feedback from that. So having some empathy, we could have easily said, you know what, we're removing the handicap program where everyone pays for parking. But we kind of balanced that whole situation, and it worked out well for us.
Hospitals are difficult because they're, number one, so large. There's Jackson Memorial, where Joaquin worked, had a 22,000 daytime population, not counting the thousands and thousands of patients and visitors who keep coming every day and they never stop. So when you're, I believe this isn't parking, but it's there's a job inside of every major hospital. I've got to get this right. The director of facilities that runs the hospital, basically runs the grounds, the buildings. I think that's the toughest job I've ever seen in my life, the people who do that. And for us, I mean, it just never stops. And it's like Joaquin said, and you guys heard me say in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, every employee in the parking world should go spend a day in the booth at a hospital, because you see everything you can imagine and terrible stories. And it's a very different role as a cashier. You have to be able to be a cashier, but at moments in time, you have to be able to look at the person in the car, and they're just not going to be able to go through this transaction like everybody else does. You got to be there to help them. Plus, you have a difficult campus. I'll tell this quick story. I don't know if Joaquin's ever heard this story or not. A couple of weeks before we took over Jackson Memorial, which was 1990, so this was before the parking network, I was at the campus getting ready to take over a huge operation. And I kept seeing this truck drive around, and it was the parking maintenance truck. And I kept seeing this truck drive around, and the back of the truck was level over with parking gates. And I kept seeing, and it was always full of parking gates, right? So I asked someone, I said, well, why does he have so many gates in the back of his car? And their answer to me was just, you don't know? Well, we have to replace every gate every day, every gate. And there were 35 lanes.
Something like that.
Parking at Jackson Memorial Hospital. So what happened was the equipment sucked, and the rule for the employees in the hospital was first person out breaks the gate, because it doesn't work anyway. So they would hit it with their car and break the gate.
Wow.
Yeah. I was in, by the time you got there, I believe the slot was gone, but it was a surface lot right down by the east garage. So I drove on that lot, and it had a coin machine that you paid on the exit. So I'm just pulled on, I'm looking and come around to pay, and I drive up to the thing to pay, because you had to put quarters in it, so it took a few minutes. This house staff doctor walks up, and he says, oh, just a minute, and he grabs the gate, pulls it, and breaks it for me.
Customer service for the win right there.
Greatest customer service ever. So it was it was a challenge, and not all hospitals are that bad, but there's some little bits of all of that we saw at Jackson Memorial in every hospital I've ever dealt with. So it's almost like it should be mandatory, Joaquin, for everybody to start at a hospital.
I agree.
Because of what you experience and go through there. Great place. And difficult to manage. Great place to learn.
It is.
Okay, Leigh, I had to tell my story. You know me, I couldn't help it. I had to tell my story.
It was a good one.
I hope that truck is no longer there.
I don't think so. It wasn't there when I was around.
Hopefully I retired it.
Yeah, hopefully they got their equipment figured out. So you mentioned, Joaquin, early on that training is one of the tenets of growth, successful growth, is training new employees, training the trainers of these employees. So you mentioned that when you're managing a hospital parking operation, empathy is something that is a requirement in your customer service conversations. How do you train your employees to be empathetic? What does that even look like?
I think the number one thing is, it's almost like, when you're raising your kids, right? Your kids are gonna They're going to see what you're doing. They're going to look at your actions, and that's what they're going to learn from. Right? So if you're always screaming at them for something that they did wrong, they're always going to feel like all we have to do is scream to get things worse. But if you talk to them, you explain to them, and you show them what they did wrong and how they could fix it, then they learn quick. And the same thing with the training. When, we had the command center, and I would take calls, and I would just politely, it's just, the hospital was something else. It was a lot of rude people. It was a different environment. But regardless of the fact, I would sit with the command center, and I would explain to them, like, we have to have empathy. You don't know what's on the other side of the microphone, what that person's going through. Most likely they're going through something bad because they're here, right? They're not here because they're going to have a fun time. They're not coming to watch a baseball game or anything like that. So showing them and then explaining to them why we're doing what we're doing, right? If they get out of line, you keep your composure, be calm, be nice, try your best to help them. It's not always about trying to get that extra dollar. Sometimes maybe just telling the person, you know what, we know you lost your ticket. Just tell us what time you came in, and we'll charge you accordingly. That action right there is, goes a long way. So training on paper, and then also showing them what you're talking about. I think it's very important, especially when you're trying to, train emotional intelligence, because basically that's what it is. You have to have the emotional intelligence to be able to train someone to have sympathy.
So speaking of training, tell me about Valet. You mentioned that it's something that's maybe misunderstood often by not only parkers, but even the industry itself. So what do you wish that the general population knew about Valet?
I have never been the manager of a Valet operation. I've always been, whether it's a senior manager level or now the director of parking, I've always had manager. But one of the things that I've noticed in this Valet operation that I didn't see anywhere else is our guy here, Danny. He requires a lot. His expectations for everyone that comes in are very high for a valet attendant. For example, you have to wear black shoes. Your socks have to be ankle high. You have to have your name tag all the way. Your shorts can be cargo shorts. When you write the location, you have to write it in a black marker. It has to be a specific way to write it. When you're checking the cars, you start from one angle to the other side. Like he has this other thing that when you get in the car before you go park, you put the window down, because sometimes we need to get a hold of you to pick up. So there's little things that sometimes you're like, this is tedious stuff, but it works. It's worked for him for 20 years. And when I see that, I'm impressed, because I've never seen that before. We always give them a uniform and tell them, okay, here's your uniform, but he's telling you how to wear your uniform. Your pen, it's part of your uniform. So if you come and you don't have a pen, he sends you home or writes you up. If he tells you you have to be here at 11, he expects by 11 o'clock, you're ready to park vehicles. The way he does his rotation of the employees, to pick up the car, he explains to them there's enough tip to go around. Your job here is to park cars and provide customer service. Right. So it's not to make tips. You're going to make tips on the way, but this is what you have. This is your job. And he holds them to such a high standard that sometimes the guys feel like, I think it's overwhelming for me, but essentially they buy to they understand the culture, and they're like, now I know why Danny tells me what he tells me. And they've been here, we have a lot of long tenure employees, valet employees. Right now, at the top of my head, I could tell we have 6 or 7 of them that have been here for more than 10 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
We still have a high turnover, but that's because it's just the industry we're in, right? Valet is always that way. But we're very competitive, right? I've always believed in you have to take care of your employees, especially if they do right by you. And I feel like the valet employees, they do right by us. They're the reason why we meet our goals every year. So every year we're doing market studies to see what what a competitive rate is, and we'll make sure that we're either at that rate or we're better. So like, for example, this year we realized that in the area, a starting valet rate was like $13. So we said, you know what, that's what we need to be. So we put everybody at $13, and whoever was more than that, we gave them the same amount of raises. So it just creates, that good culture, and people just love to work here.
That's good. Valet managers are, it's a tough job, but it's seldom that you ever see one that is that good at managing, much less just being a valet operation. but that good at just managing. It's
it's funny because one of the things that he always says, he's like, I'm not a nice guy, but but I'm the same way with everyone. Like, I don't like anyone or I don't dislike anyone. I treat everyone exactly the same. And that's perfect. He understands. He's not here to be liked. He's here to do a job.
Okay, Joaquin, it was so cool to hear about a valet operation that is well managed. I love hearing those stories. So often we're overwhelmed with what we know not to do, but it's really great to hear stories of what we should be doing.
Correct. I agree 100% with that.
And valets are just tough to manage, but it's seldom that we find a great manager like that in valet just because it's so hard they don't survive. So it's good to see one.
So you have a rich and diverse history in the parking industry. So from your perspective, Joaquin, where do you think the industry is going? What is in the future and what should we be doing to get there?
So, the post-COVID has been really what kind of took this industry from kind of the traditional way we operated to technology driven. I think we went from, if you see a lot of these new companies like Metropolis and Pave and all this pay by phone and Park Mobile and all this gateless system, I think that's where we're heading, right? LPR cameras, AI. It went from a business of, having gates and finding the right equipment to now, finding a way to not have gates and trying to get, collect management fees or even revenues through transactions, right? We become more a transactional industry than we were, we're going to put gates, we're going to charge a management fee. So technology has really taken this to the next level. And, obviously, I think that the technology boosts in license plate recognition cameras. Now they basically do a lot of the job for you. It was funny because I was talking with a parking professional yesterday, and they were mentioning that, there's no need for bookkeepers anymore. I remember back in the day, the bookkeeper was, if not more important, but as important as a manager. And nowadays they don't exist, right? You have all this pay by app and they give you the reports, they break it down by day. So really there's not a need to have, or at least not to have one bookkeeper for each location. Now you have, one bookkeeper to oversee several locations. Technology has done that for us.
The biggest challenge, I was thinking about that really last night in a project that we were looking at. The bookkeeper job it was nice to have, but it causes so much trouble because you're trying to get bookkeepers stationed at 1,000 locations all over the country. So it's really hard to keep the quality up. And to be able to narrow that down to a few more select and highly trained people really help our industry a lot. But it's funny that you mention it because I don't think many people understand, because that's a behind the scenes change that most people don't see. So most people don't notice it, but it's a really, really important change in this business.
And working with the parking network and doing the record audits and field audits is really what opened my eyes for this, right? We start looking, when you start going over these reports and you realize like a lot of the errors that they make and the difference between a good bookkeeper and a bad bookkeeper kind of gives you gave me the ability to, or the understanding of what the job entails and how important it is to operation. And when I came here to Bal Harbour Shops, one of the things that I felt we lacked a little bit was the bookkeeping, because we went from having equipment that was 20 years old to bringing in flash. And the way they were doing the bookkeeping, they were putting numbers and they were depositing cash, right? But there was no check of balances. So I came in, I'm like, okay, I have somebody that does the daily cash deposit. I have someone that enters the information and I review it. And now we're able to look at that information. We're able to look at data and make better decision for operations in the future. And that's what bookkeeping does too. And obviously it keeps it's, you want to make sure that the money goes from the customer to the machine to the bank. Right, that's important, and that's something I learned from Clyde. That was our goal. That's our goal as parking operators: to make sure that we try to bring every penny to the bank. And sometimes
it's the cars and the money in the bank.
It's sometimes it's very difficult to do, but when you have the right system in place, it's really good and it's easy, right? To a point where you're almost minimizing the shortage to less than 1%. And I believe that we've done that here, and I've done that in most of my locations, not all of them. And that's something that I've always, I take pride in. I know how to keep, I don't know how to make the revenue, and I also know how to keep it, right? Because if you're making it, you're not keeping it. It's almost as if you're not making it. So I think that's been important. So bookkeeping, it's very important, but it has changed. Technology has changed from that, and technology has kind of become the bookkeeper, right? Because the system charges a dollar and it's going directly to a bank. It's not going through. There's no middle person.
Right. Yeah, behind the scenes, really big change in our industry that, what gives us a lot more time to manage the day-to-day and the customers instead of having to panic over, did we get the money in the bank? A big change.
And then the information that we're getting from all this equipment are also gives, parking is, I still believe parking is an industry where you have to be in the field to learn it, right? I've always done that. I still do it now. I'm always walking around. I'm talking to my employees, asking them, any issues, what is a big issue? What do you think we should change? But the information that we're getting from parking technology today has made it a lot easier for us to make decisions. Like, when we're looking at market rates, right? We're doing a rate survey. Sometimes people they feel like, okay, if the lot next door is $20, I'm going to be at $20. But it doesn't work that way. What you want to look at is what's your duration of time. Is somebody really going to pay $20 to go grab coffee, in downtown Miami at 8:00 in the morning? Probably not. You're going to lose that customer. So having that information that we have through data and through technology, it's made it easier for us to make those type of decisions. And I know back then, maybe we had the ability to get that information, but it was so hard to grab and put it and analyze it. Now it's almost spoon fed to us. If you know how to look for it, it's very easy, and it does a lot for us, especially like from a director perspective, where I don't have the chance to be in the field all the time. I sit a lot behind a desk, but I know my operation. I tell all of my employees, I tell all of my clients, I know everything that goes on in the garage, whether I'm there or not. I know what's our peak time. I know who our customers are. I know, we look at, when we do our pay and display signs or pay by phone signs, they're unique signs. So we know where people are paying. Are they paying closer to stairs? Are they paying in the middle of the garage? Are they paying more in the elevator lobby? So all that type of information
very
is
wise. Yes.
just keeps improving, and technology is doing that. So it just gives us the ability to make better decisions and run an efficient operation.
Very, very smart. It was good to hear that you're doing that. That way you can track your customers and you know where to really put extra signs or you know where they're going. Right. It's a neat way to do that. Way to go.
Thank you.
Yeah, recently I put together a template to guide a parking facility manager through creating a market survey. And it was really exciting to hear you discuss so many components of that package that TPN put together for our customers. Because it's great to hear that a valuable time collecting data about your facility can reap such great rewards. Like when you know your customers and you know your numbers, you really can make decisions that will drive up revenue and help you keep that revenue. So that's really great to hear. One more question from me, Joaquin, is about gateless. I understand that you have experience with gated facilities and gateless. What works in both kinds of operations? What doesn't work? Could you give us some details about this buzzword?
For me, gateless, I always find it as like a second option to another location. I never go into a location and think, oh, I'm doing gateless, right? But a surface lot that is probably going up for development in the next 1 or 2 years, and you don't want to invest $50,000 or $60,000, even though now it's become a lot cheaper with this HOS programs and these programs. But regardless, you don't want to do the infrastructure of bringing internet and bringing power and building islands and all the civil work. Then maybe gateless works. But I'm a strong believer of gates. I still think gates, it's the way to go. It's the way you capture, most of your revenue. You're never going to capture 100% of it, but most of it. And like in my locations, I tried gateless and I didn't like it. I think it, if you're servicing a building, for example, or let's say the mall, we don't do it here, and we're never going to do it here. But if you're servicing a building and you have customers that, that come to the building and they have to park in your garage. And I feel like gateless, even if you're telling them to pay before, if you're telling them that you're going to find them if they don't pay, if you're telling them that they have 15 minutes, to exit or make up their mind, even if you're informing them, but you still cite them because they either overstayed their pay, or they just forgot to pay, or, whatever the case might be. When they get this citation to their house, that's $75, $85, I've seen $105. it just leaves such a bad taste in their mouth. And I feel like, customer retention, it's so important for any business, but specifically for the parking business, because there's so much competition that, to get that person to come back. And if that person has the experience where they went into your garage, they didn't read the signs, or they forgot the signs, or they didn't see them, and they didn't know that, they're used to paying at the exit, and they just drive out, and then they get what became a $10 parking payment. Now it's $100 citation. So that just leaves a bad taste. Even if they dispute it and you work with them, the fact that they had to go back home and get a citation and send an email and wait for a response, I didn't like it. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I personally don't like it. Here at the mall, I get 100 phone calls a week about, this type of technology. And I tell them that I like the gate. People think, because it's gateless and the friction and all that. I'm like, you just got to give them, the experience has to be good. You come in, you have a ticket, you can put your phone number, you can put your credit card to come in or out. Or even, through Flash, we're trying to find ways to make it even better where they have express payment and stuff like that. And then we give them pay on foot station. We give them the option to pay through their phone. We give them the option to text to pay. So just give them all those options. And then you have the LPR. So if the person is able to pay before they get to the gate, then it's kind of like frictionless, right? The only time they had to really use a machine was when they came in. But on the way out, they just drive out of the garage. And we're trying to push our customers to pay ahead of before returning to their car, because that gives them the real, I wouldn't say gateless experience, but similar to a gateless experience where they're not having to go to the exit and scan a ticket and put their credit card. So if you're able to do that, offer them, the ability to, give them 3 or 4 options to pay for the parking, and then have the LPR component that reads that license plate and knows it's paid for and just opens the gate. It almost kind of gives you a semi-gateless operation.
As we move into this world that we're moving into now, with certainly the technology that's giving us the ability to read license plates better and better all the time, and to be able to have people pay remotely on their cell phone before they get to the exit, and then by the time they get to the exit, they paid. When you're managing something that's, especially something that's really critical to your business, at some point you have to ask yourself, if we're going to make this change, what's the purpose? And frictionless isn't good enough for me. I hear that all the time. Well, it's frictionless. I don't know what's frictionless about. Some of your customers end up over here that don't understand all the system, and you end up having to chase them around and find them, and they end up having to pay money they never intended to pay or don't have. So all you've done is taken something, that in over my 40 however many years in parking, it's been a lot. The only time gates were a problem was when I saw operations that weren't taken care of, because the gate was really the least problem of everything we have. If the gate didn't go up, it was rarely ever the fault of the gate. It was always the fault of something else within the park system. And as these park systems scale down and improve with technology, I just don't see the purpose in this, because what I see, and I always make this analogy, if you look at what's the one place where people hate parking? Well, it's the on-street managed by the cities, where they write tickets all the time, and some of the tickets aren't justified, or they highly believe it wasn't justified. So we end up with this constant battle going on within on-street parking and the municipal parking operation. So you ask, people always say, yeah, I hate parking downtown on the streets, it's terrible. Well, it's because we're writing tickets, and now we're trying to move it to off-street into my garage. Please don't. please don't come in my garage and write tickets. But we'll take care of it.
And from a revenue perspective, I've yet to see that the citation program, revenue retention program works. A lot of these operators say, we get 60-70% collection rate. I'm dealing with it, and I don't see those numbers. I'm still at the 30%. So it just, I know, and a lot of these companies says, no, we're going to get you the 60, we're going to get you the 70, that we send it to collection. I haven't seen those numbers yet. So, and because of that, I'm not a believer of gateless. I still like, gated equipment, making processes easier even for our monthly parkers, through Park It, which is something that Flash has. I use my location. Monthly parkers never have to see anyone, never have to deal with anyone, never have to pick up a card. All they have to do is register for the parking and download an app if they want to. If not, we have their license plate and they just drive in and out of the garage anytime. So you're doing that, and you're providing the several options to your customers, and you're just making sure the consistency in each touch point is there. It's almost better than frictionless because you're engaging the customer in a good parking experience.
Yeah, it's reminding me of my education time. And in my classroom, I would grade all those papers. And if a student didn't make any mistakes on the paper, I would give that student a check plus. And if a student missed some things, then that student got a check. Well, there was a few times where a student would come to me and say, Miss Thomas, I didn't miss anything on my paper. And I would say, I know, good job. And the student would say, but you forgot my plus. You forgot my check plus. And I'm just wondering if that gate arm going up for your customer is like that check plus. Like, I have had a parking experience. I have paid my bill. My plate has been read. And that gate going up is like a check plus in our brain that, yes, we did this right.
That's a great analogy.
It is. And you know what's the thing about gateless? When I run in parking or in anything, right? You want to make sure you give all of your customers a good experience, 100% of them. So, what they push is like, you're only going to get 10% of your customers that are not going to pay because whether they forgot to pay or they didn't want to pay. But I think giving even those 10% of your customers, the comfort that they did everything right, because when they got to the exit, that gate went up. Like you said, that check plus, I think that goes a long way too, because 10% of customers that don't like your system, it's a big revenue hit, just that recurrent revenue.
What percentage of that 10% of customers are never coming back?
Even if it's 5%, I mean, it's a big revenue hit.
You're right.
I read an article that said, 5% of customer retention sometimes produce up to 20% of revenue. That's a large number.
A lot. Yes. Yeah. Well, we're probably going to get a few calls over this. Tell Fred I said hello.
We've been in the industry long enough to earn some respect, and they know that before they call us, they better have a lot of information.
Yeah, I want to see some numbers to back up some opinions.
That's right. That's the main thing. See the numbers, and we do happen to know what the numbers are. And it's we don't need to add to the bad experiences people have with parking. We need to make them great experiences, all of them. And so I love Leigh's analogy. I want my check plus, man. So that's interesting. Okay.
Well, gentlemen, I think our time is coming to a close. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you'd like to add to our conversation?
I just want to say it's such a pleasure to have Joaquin on our podcast. He's just one of those young people that I saw when he started, and I've watched him come up through the system, and I'm so proud of everything that he's done. What a great young man, and continuing a great future. It's such a pleasure to have him on the podcast. But it's really a pleasure to see how far he's come. We certainly in our industry need a lot of people to line up behind Joaquin and follow his footsteps.
Thank you, Clyde. I really appreciate that. And I've been blessed. I always say I've been blessed because I've had good mentors. Clyde being one of them, working at the Parking Network and doing those skill studies in different cities. It just kind of opened my mind, and being able to have other mentors has kind of given me a little advantage, and I'm always humbled to be able to have that. And if I ever have a question, I'm able to call someone. So I never take that for granted. Obviously, a lot of hard work. I tell all my employees, I was a cashier at one point, and I'm here now. This industry has a lot of good career opportunities. You just got to work hard, and you just got to, like any other industry, you have to work hard and you have to learn it and have a passion for it. I think, I found the passion in parking, and that has taken me from where I was at 10 years ago to where I'm at today. I love parking. I could talk parking. My wife tells me, do you know anything other than parking? I'm like, it's worked for me for the last 20 years. I don't want to change anything.
Occupational hazard, right?
So yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for all the experience, all the friendships I've built. It just, a lot of my closest friends are people that I've met through the parking industry. So that's truly, it's been a really good journey for me. And And I look forward for the next, I don't know if I'm going to do it for another 20 years, but definitely for another 5 years.
Sounds great. Well, gentlemen, thank you for the lively and organic conversation today. To all of our listeners, thanks for sticking with us to the end. We hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Joaquin and Clyde, have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you all next time on our Parking Industry Podcast.
Thank you so much, Leigh.
Thank you, Leigh.
Appreciate it, Joaquin.
Thank you, Clyde.
To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on our Parking Industry Podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on our Parking Industry.